Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Is Donald Trump a modern-day anti-hero? What is the state of liberalism in what is referred to as political correctness? How did we get to a place where politics is hyper-prejudice against prejudice? Is liberalism caving in on itself? To CrossTalk Political Correctness, I'm joined by my guest, Daniel Bonavac in Austin. He is a professor of philosophy at the University of Texas. And here in Moscow, we cross to Jeffrey Taylor. He is a contributing editor at The Atlantic and author of numerous books. All right, gentlemen, CrossTalk rules. In effect, that means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Daniel, let me go to you first in Austin. Is Donald Trump an anti-hero, if by accident, because of the concept of political correctness? Is he a representative, a symbol of pushing back from political correctness?
Absolutely. I think he very much is. I think that was a large part of his appeal. People are tired of being told they have to conform to a variety of attitudes and thoughts. They're tired of being told they have to live a lie. And he was so blatantly opposed to political correctness, so clearly willing to say things that would get people in trouble, that I think it had a real freeing effect. People felt as if finally it's possible to talk openly about this. And even if they didn't entirely agree with what he said, they appreciated the attempt to open the boundaries, to shift the Overton window, as some people have said.
Jeffrey, weigh in on, because an example of Elizabeth Warren, which he claims that she has some Native American blood in her, and Trump throughout the entire campaign called her Pocahontas, which, every time he said that, I was a bit surprised, but he didn't say he didn't correct himself, he didn't apologize, he just kept going, and I think that is part of the electorate. A lot of the electorate kind of like that kind of pushback, okay? Because they didn't see it as being insulting, but it certainly wasn't politically correct. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, I mean, if you look at history as a dialectic, we as a person of the left, I can say we're living largely in the world that was born in the 60s, and things are starting to swing back and correct for that. People on the left police each other's language probably more so than anybody else. And with Elizabeth Warren, of course, I mean, I don't think anybody else would have spoke that way.
I agree.
But we have to also remember that roughly 1 out of 4 of the electorate, the total electorate, voted for Trump. I mean, he lost the popular vote by 3 million, and only about half of the Americans voted who could have voted. So I wouldn't want to draw. I think we're still living in the world created in the 60s and the 70s.
Daniel, you're in academia. How much do you feel that? I mean, when I come across these reports where students are given the option of what pronoun they want to be addressed with, I mean, I'm pretty sure that middle America, your typical red state would find that really quite bewildering. And as a matter of fact, they do find it bewildering when a person has the right to decide what pronoun to address them. When we have problems with the economy, employment, infrastructure, that is outrageous, I would say. Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, absolutely. It is overwhelming. Not only the pronoun thing, which luckily has not come to Texas yet, but is sweeping various parts of the country. But there are other things. There was a professor at Louisiana State University who was fired for occasionally cursing in class and telling some jokes that had a mild sexual content. There is another professor who has gotten into trouble on his campus for taking some students to China and singing a version of a Beach Boys song. I wish they all could be California girls, except that he substituted names of Chinese cities for parts of the United States in the song. And the thought that a Beach Boys song is something that is sort of wildly inappropriate and politically incorrect and could get someone removed from a position of being able to receive certain grants and take international trips just seems preposterous. I've noticed in my own classes, even something as utterly trivial as using an example from Gottlob Frege about a triangle can lead some students to raise their eyebrows and start shaking their heads like a triangle. And in short, you can't talk about geometry without crossing these boundaries. So I think it did start in the 60s and 70s, but The problem is it keeps expanding and the boundaries keep shifting of what it's possible to say.
Yeah, and if I go back to Jeffrey, then Donald Trump ended up being this one huge brick wall that seems to challenge it here. Address this issue of angry white men. For me, that's an excuse to try to explain the loss of the Democrats, because the Democrats don't want to talk about how they lost the working class base, and they flip it upside down as that it's only angry white men. How do you address that?
Well, I don't believe that Hillary got more than 1% more of the vote, the women's vote, than Romney got 4 years ago. So I don't think it's a question of angry white men. I think that the neoliberal economic policies that led us into where we are, even if the economy is doing well, it's not doing well for a certain segment of the population. And then the inability of people, especially on the left, to talk frankly about subjects because of political correctness, created this opportunity where Donald Trump, alone among the 16 or 17 Republican candidates, understood that. He perceived it in some way that nobody else did, and he made use of it. But in fact, a lot of women, and as you know, Trump got more African-American voters and more Latino voters than Romney did.
Yep.
So it really is not just an issue of angry white men.
Daniel, if we look at how Western liberalism developed, particularly in the 19th century all the way up to the 1960s, since it was already mentioned, liberalism was always about inclusion, bringing in people, creating a large tent. It seems to me that it's caving in on itself. Now we only have our clans and we have our tribes, and we're only interested in our clan and our tribe, and you're not particularly interested in looking outward and understanding the other tribes and clans. And liberalism is also about, and most importantly, two words: common good. I don't see liberalism doing that at all in the West right now. I see everybody being divided and put into boxes, and then we're told how to talk about those people, and not just about sensitivity. Because if you don't say the right thing, the conversation's over. Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. I think there was a deep incoherence, in fact, in Hillary's campaign. She had a slogan, "Stronger Together," and yet the identity politics that she and other Democrats were practicing really contradicted that. She wasn't bringing the country together. It was a very divisive campaign. She dismissed Trump supporters as a basket of deplorables, as racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, etc. And that really, I think, had a large impact among people who were even lukewarm about Trump. That tended to drive them further toward him because they realized that she was calling implicitly them that and him, all of those names, for raising issues that they thought were important issues, for talking about immigration. And whether they agreed with him about immigration or not, at least they thought we ought to be talking about this.
Yes.
We should not be moving more and more toward open borders without a discussion. We shouldn't be just declining to enforce immigration law without any conversation. And the Democratic Party basically said, we can't have that conversation. To raise the issue is racist. And Trump pushed back against that. I think it did liberate people to say, yes, we need to talk about these things, and it gave him a lot of support he might not have had otherwise.
Jeffrey, weigh in on that, because it's really interesting is that if we look at how we were talking about here about the Democratic Party and the candidacy of Hillary Clinton, but you have academia, you have Hollywood, and you have the liberal mainstream media basically all talking to each other using the same language and having the same parameters and taboos. Can't say that, don't go there. And I think that was one of the reasons that turned off a lot of people from the campaign itself, is because nobody talked to them. Okay, they might be white and they might be angry, and they might be angry white men, but there's a lot of people that felt that they weren't being spoken to by the array of forces that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I think Daniel just said it perfectly. So, in fact, I think that I saw somewhere an analysis of Hillary's speeches and the way she selected the group she was speaking to, and about the only people she left out, meaning the ones she took for granted, were the white working class. And that didn't work. And with the deplorables comment was a perfect example of it was really a rookie. Not even a rookie would make that mistake. It was arrogance. It was presumptuousness. And I think we got, as a result, a lot of people stayed home, also as a result of what was done to Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Party. They wouldn't vote for Hillary because of what was done to Bernie. And the ones who came out were, the turnout was low, but they came out at least, Trump lost by 3 million votes, the popular vote, but still, he campaigned in the states that mattered, and he won. So. Again, I think we're living in a world, in fact, in a world that's much more just than the world of 50 years ago. Basically, the progressive people have, in a great way, achieved their dreams. And the problem seems to be the dialectic that things start to swing backwards when they go overboard, with sort of a victor's
curse,
gloating.
Yeah. Daniel, I think because of this political correctness that we have, is that it's no wonder to me, and I'm not going to justify it, but again, when you're called a deplorable, you're called an angry white man, you're being put into a certain category and put into your own tribe, and it's no wonder that people might think, well, we have our identity and our rights as well, and I think that's the ricochet of this political correctness, because then you get down people talking about white privilege, and that's a huge discussion all by itself. Go ahead.
I think that's right. To pick up on something Jeffrey was just saying, the civil rights movement created basically a large institutional structure of people who, in a sense, won the battle and didn't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
And so the issues they pick out become less and less important, less and less significant, and more intrusive on people's ordinary lives. And as a result of that, you get a sense in which, yes, people who are not fitting into one of the favored categories feel more and more surrounded by groups who are demanding special privileges.
Gentlemen, I'm going to hang on here. I'm going to jump in here.
People should be treated equally.
We have to go to a hard break here, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on political correctness. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter LaBelle. To remind you, we're discussing political correctness. Okay, and we're also now joined by Ralph Niemeyer. He's in Stuttgart, and he's a German journalist and author. Ralph, thank you for joining us. I understood you heard the first part of the program, so you're up to speed here. I mean, looking at we're talking about political correctness, and we're talking really about the phenomenon known as Donald Trump. I started out by saying, is he a modern-day anti-hero? What I think is very interesting is that we have the same kind of political correctness politics, these identity politics in Europe. What impact, from your perspective, sitting in Germany and having elections looming, how much does Donald Trump play into your mind and into campaigns? Go ahead.
Well, I would say that indeed here is a great anxiety in Germany about what Donald Trump's policy will be about. Well, people did understand that people were angry in America, and that was the wave sweeping him into the White House. But here in Germany, they're also worried about what is going to happen to NATO, what is going to happen to their own election campaigns. And I think that we are living through different times now, I say, from the surrealistic world maybe to more realism.
Okay, I guess it remains to be seen how the impact will play, the Trump phenomenon, I suppose we can call it that. Jeffrey, one of the things, again, if we look at these campaigns, and we can talk about, include Brexit if we want to, is that, traditionally politics talk about the economy, war and peace, education, maybe even distribution of wealth. And again, because of this whole political correctness and identity project, you don't really talk about that, because these different groups that we've been pigeonholed into, those issues that I just mentioned don't necessarily intersect, okay? They have their own specific issues. And this is what I think is breaking down the democratic process, and most importantly, a democratic conversation. Go ahead.
Well, I agree. We can add the migrant crisis to Europe. I mean, we're getting so many factors in play here, and we need to have frank discussions about what's possible, what's in the interest of the citizens of the various countries that are, for instance, in Europe, accepting the migrants, most particularly Germany, obviously. And if we can't have a conversation where we can all talk rationally, then master of chaos, someone like Donald Trump will be able to come into play and prevail. So I think also, you're seeing the rise of far right all over Europe, but in particular, most notably, even in Austria and Germany and France. And if we can't have a discussion, that pushes people into the camp of the far right. So,
Daniel, one of the interesting things, through this program, we've noted some statistics when it came to the U.S. presidential election, but 80% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. I bring it up because the fact that they're evangelicals is an issue for them in their identity politics, okay? And that is not taken into account when you have the national coverage of the campaign. It's very rarely there. Maybe 20 years ago, you were thinking about what the evangelicals think, but that's not the case right now. And I think that this is something people feel that they're left out. And I don't really think of Donald Trump as much of an evangelical, but I guess that was their only choice. Go ahead.
That's absolutely right. I get weekly reports from George Barna of surveys of evangelicals, and support for Donald Trump firmed up during the election campaign and then became overwhelming, and evangelicals voted for Trump at a higher rate than Romney, a higher rate than McCain. And it's not because they thought of Donald Trump as a religious person. It's because they saw the political correctness regime being pushed by the other side as a deep threat to religious freedom. It wasn't really just about gay marriage or issues like that, or abortion or anything specific. It was rather a sense that was becoming articulated more and more throughout the campaign, that religious people, religious considerations did not belong in the public square, according to the Democratic Party. And people thought, really, this is our only choice. If we are not to be persecuted as Christians, we need to vote for Donald Trump. So it ended up being, I think, a very powerful force and something that helped him a great deal, especially in certain swing states. But it's not something that I think most people had on their radar screen. They thought Trump is obviously not a person who's very seriously religious and didn't think that would be a factor.
Ralph, one of the interesting things, and I'm glad that Jeffrey brought it up, the immigration issue, and it's a real burning issue in Europe in a different way than it is from the United States. But one of the things that I find very, very troublesome is when you have a conversation or attempt to have a conversation about migrants. It seems to me that the left always wants to control the discourse, what words you use, what meaning they have, and I find that it is very, very troublesome because it doesn't really help get solutions. Okay, this is a very serious problem for Europe. It includes security. It includes borders. It also includes, very deep questions about cultural diversity and to what degree you want to have cultural diversity. Now I'm going to get in trouble with someone for saying that. Go ahead.
Well, of course, we debate that here thoroughly, and there is a leftist kind of political correctness to say that all refugees are always welcome and we should open all our borders and all that. That's the typical leftist political correctness, so to speak. But I think that people haven't woken up yet. I mean, also at the European leftists, they do not understand that this is a destabilization of our society. It's challenging our moral values, and it is indeed something uncontrollable, because we cannot tell people not to swim to our borders, then they drown. So it's different than in the United States of America that they build a wall. We don't want to build walls, although Frontex is indeed doing that in Europe as well. So it's a tough question for leftists to say there is destabilization coming through refugees, because many of the refugees who are coming are indeed not the poorest or the most needy ones. The poorest, they don't have the money to travel, and the most needy ones that really should come here, the asylum seekers for political asylum or fleeing from war zones, they don't make it here. So we do have this discussion, and of course we have a competition on the labor market because of refugees, right. And that is enhancing the right-wing mood in Germany as well.
Jeffrey, if I can go back to you here in Moscow, this whole, I like how you said, we're looking at the dialectic here. Okay, we have the pendulum swinging back here. I mean, how can Donald Trump, or maybe he can't, we don't know yet. I find it really remarkable. So many people already writing his obituary, already writing his history. It's not even a week. It's a week today. Is there any way that he's going to be able to talk to these forces, and will they be willing to listen to him? Because this is what's the most dangerous thing. Not necessarily his ideas, but the fact that people will not engage in a constructive dialogue. That's what we need to have in Europe and in America. Go ahead. Yeah,
but when you're talking about Donald Trump, he spent the first hours complaining that the press was misreporting the size of his crowds. Yep. And then now it's millions of illegal voters. I mean, Trump is, as the president, he has the bully pulpit, and he's using it for these trivial, narcissistic matters. So he's derailing himself, and he's as you said, we're on day 4 of his first work week, day 3, 4, and he's not able to focus. And that's one of the takeaways I got from all the reporting done in the Washington Post, leaks from his own staff. Are saying he won't focus on anything, he won't take any advice. So I don't think he'll be able to direct, at least so far, he hasn't shown that he's going to be able to direct the conversation. Okay, that's very interesting. Daniel, how do you feel about that? One of the takeaways they take from all of this, the grinding 18 months of campaigning and election, I mean, it's a spectacle, But you know what? He seems to come up to the fore and really meet the challenge here. Not that, and I've been severely criticized for it. I disagree with many things he's said and done and doing right now. But as a phenomenon, he seems to be able to, he's like a weeble that wobbles that doesn't fall down. He just pops up again. Go ahead.
Well, I think he's actually doing a magnificent job of controlling the conversation because he keeps the media focused on issues that don't make any difference while he's doing important things in the background. A number of the executive orders that he's put out this week, a number of the proposals that are being floated and have been reported in a few places in the press are really not getting much attention because he's got people focused on the size of the crowd and other issues that don't really make any difference. So I think what he's doing is basically tossing out a bunch of squirrels and saying, look at the squirrel, while he's going about doing his job. And the media fall for it completely. So I think it's a trick. They're being gaslighted. They're being fooled. And it looks chaotic, but I don't think it actually is. I think behind the scenes, he's actually pursuing a very aggressive agenda and accomplishing a remarkable amount. I think he's really going to reshape a number of federal agencies. He's already put forward a number of orders, complex ones, about immigration. So I think what you're seeing here are signs of somebody who was very well prepared, is moving in with great energy to make changes, and is tossing out ridiculous things that people will talk about instead of talking about the changes. They have another effect, which is to undermine the credibility of the media. Yep. And I think it's important for him to do that. He realizes the media is largely an enemy of his, and he wants them to get involved in these ridiculous fights.
I think the media just delegitimizes itself all by itself. Ralph, let me go back to you in Stuttgart here. Everybody got Brexit wrong. Everybody got Trump wrong. What about the German elections? Are we going to get that one wrong too? Just real quick, what does your crystal ball have to say for this year?
Well, of course, I believe that things are usually estimated, and they got it wrong in many ways. I was not surprised, by the way, of Mr. Trump's victory, I must say, and I was not surprised by the Brexit. But maybe it's because I am a controversial journalist. Now, I would say it's weapons of mass distraction that are being used so that people are worrying, like we just heard, worrying about the size of a crowd somewhere. Yeah. I would say let's go and look at the deep deeper issues. And I see that Mr. Trump is very coherent. Here in Germany, people say, oh, we don't know what he's going to do next, and so on.
We've run out of time. Many thanks to my guests in Stuttgart, Moscow, and in Austin. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, CrossTalk rules. I love you.